Verstappen is in serious trouble after FIA investigates the Mexico incident. Lando reveals upcoming race disadvantage, and all the latest F1 news. What happens when Formula One's most controversial driver pulls off a move so outrageous that even seasoned commentators are calling for the harshest penalties possible? The Mexican Grand Prix just delivered one of the most debated incidents of the season, and Martin Brundle is absolutely furious about what he witnessed. Picture this scene at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Four of the sport's biggest names charging into Turn 1 side by side. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, and Lewis Hamilton, all fighting for the same piece of asphalt. What happened next has the entire Formula One paddock divided, and one of the sport's most respected voices demanding severe consequences. The chaos began immediately after the lights went out. As the field thundered toward the first corner, these four championship contenders found themselves running wheel to wheel in a death-defying display of racecraft. But here's where things get interesting. While Norris and Hamilton somehow managed to thread the needle and stay on the actual racetrack, both Leclerc and Verstappen decided the runoff area looked like a much better option. Now, Leclerc managed to emerge from this off-track adventure, still leading the pack, though he quickly handed that advantage back to Norris, who would go on to dominate the entire race. Verstappen, on the other hand, found himself buried in fourth place after his grass-cutting expedition. The stewards took a look at all the corner-cutting shenanigans and decided nobody deserved punishment. Case closed, right? Not according to Martin Brundle. Speaking on Sky's Formula One podcast, the former driver-turned-commentator didn't hold back his criticism. In his view, both drivers should have faced penalties, but Verstappen's actions were particularly egregious. Brundle argued that Leclerc at least made some attempt to navigate the first corner before bailing out on Turn 2, which in his opinion warranted a 10-second penalty. But Verstappen? That was a completely different story. Here's what really got under Brundle's skin. According to his analysis, Verstappen positioned his Red Bull on the far left of the four-wide formation, knowing full well that this placement would force him onto the curb. But instead of attempting to make the corner work, Verstappen simply accelerated through the grass, completely bypassing turns 1, 2, and 3. Brundle described it as skillful driving through the vegetation, but emphasized that skill doesn't excuse the complete lack of effort to actually race on the designated track. The veteran commentator pulled no punches in his assessment, suggesting that if the roles were reversed, Verstappen would have been screaming on the radio about drivers having no intention of making legitimate racing moves. This hypocrisy particularly frustrated Brundle, who saw a clear double standard in how such incidents are perceived depending on who's behind the wheel. But Brundle didn't stop at criticizing the move itself. He went further, calling for a drive-through penalty as the appropriate punishment. For those unfamiliar with Formula One's penalty system, a drive-through is one of the most severe sanctions available to stewards, requiring a driver to cruise through the pit lane at the mandatory speed limit without stopping for service. It's a punishment that can completely destroy a race result, which is exactly what Brundle believes was necessary. His reasoning goes beyond just punishing one incident. Brundle sees this as a critical moment where race control needed to send a message to prevent similar chaos in future races. Without proper deterrence, he argues, drivers will continue pushing boundaries until every race start becomes a free-for-all, where staying on track becomes optional. The ripple effects of lenient officiating particularly concerned Brundle. He pointed out that drivers who actually followed the rules and stayed on the racetrack were effectively penalized for their good behavior, watching helplessly as rule breakers gained positions by creating their own racing lines across the grass. This creates a dangerous precedent where following regulations becomes a competitive disadvantage. Verstappen, predictably, had his own explanation for the incident. The four-time world champion claimed his Red Bull began bottoming out on the curb, leaving him no choice but to continue straight through the runoff area. He described following the slipstream and being forced progressively leftward until mechanical limitations made corner navigation impossible. From his perspective, it was rallying between corners rather than deliberate rule breaking. Despite the controversial start, Verstappen managed to salvage his race through strategic brilliance, executing a one-stop strategy that allowed him to hunt down faster cars ahead. His tire management was nothing short of masterful, keeping soft compounds alive long enough to challenge for second place. Only a late virtual safety car prevented him from potentially overtaking Leclerc for the runner-up position. The championship implications remain fascinating. Even with the chaos and criticism, Verstappen managed to reduce his deficit to new championship leader Norris down to 36 points. With 4 races and 2 sprint events remaining, the title fight continues heating up, but incidents like Mexico raise questions about racing standards and enforcement consistency. This controversy highlights a fundamental tension in modern Formula One between allowing aggressive racing and maintaining sporting integrity. When respected voices like Martin Brundle call for severe penalties, it signals deeper concerns about where the sport draws its lines. The Mexican Grand Prix may have delivered spectacular entertainment, but it also exposed ongoing debates about rules, enforcement, and the very nature of fair competition in motorsport's premier championship. The reverberations from this incident will likely influence stewarding decisions for the remainder of the season, potentially reshaping how drivers approach similar situations in crucial championship deciding moments ahead. You won't believe what just happened at the Mexican Grand Prix that nobody saw on TV. While millions of viewers were focused on the dramatic wheel-to-wheel action between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, there was another story unfolding behind the scenes that's absolutely hilarious and reveals the raw emotions of Formula One racing. Picture this: you're George Russell, cruising along in 5th place, when suddenly the 2 drivers ahead of you decide to recreate a scene from a demolition derby. What happens next is pure comedy gold, captured on team radio that wasn't broadcast to the world until now. The chaos began on lap 6 when Verstappen made an aggressive move on Hamilton at turn 1. These aren't just any drivers we're talking about. This is a 3-time world champion going wheel-to-wheel with a 7-time champion. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the racing was about to get absolutely wild. Verstappen found himself squeezed to the outside at turn 2, leaving him with nowhere to go except straight across the grass. He rejoined the track still ahead of Hamilton, but Lewis wasn't having any of it. At turn 4, Hamilton attempted to reclaim his position, but locked up his brakes and took his own scenic route across the grass, rejoining significantly ahead of his rival. Now here's where it gets interesting for Russell. He's sitting there in his Mercedes, watching this entire drama unfold right in front of him like he's got front row seats to the world's most expensive bumper car competition. But instead of benefiting from the chaos ahead, Russell suddenly finds himself dropping down the order faster than a lead balloon. The stewards eventually handed Hamilton a 10-second penalty for gaining a lasting advantage, but by then the damage was done. Russell had been caught up in the aftermath and found himself tumbling down the field. First, he lost positions while trying to navigate around Verstappen. Then Oliver Bearman in the Haas managed to slip past him. And to add insult to injury, his own Mercedes teammate, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, overtook him too. This is where Russell's reaction becomes absolutely priceless. Over the team radio, you can hear his initial response: pure exasperation mixed with disbelief. He literally laughed out loud before delivering one of the most savage burns of the season, comparing his fellow drivers to amateur go-kart racers having their first ever race. His race engineer, Marcus Dudley, could only respond with sympathy, basically saying he completely understood Russell's frustration. It's one of those moments where you can feel the shared disbelief between driver and engineer, both watching their race strategy go up in smoke because of someone else's drama. But Russell wasn't finished venting his frustrations. Later in the race, when his engineer warned him about dangerously high tire temperatures while he was stuck behind Antonelli, Russell delivered another epic radio message that perfectly captured the intensity and pressure of Formula One racing. He made it crystal clear that he had Oscar Piastri's McLaren breathing down his neck, a car that was significantly faster than his Mercedes. Russell knew he had better pace than his young teammate ahead, and believed they could fight for a podium position if only the team would make the call to swap positions. The frustration in his voice was palpable as he explained that his tires were being destroyed while sitting in traffic, unable to use his superior pace. He even offered to give the position back to Antonelli if he couldn't make progress, showing the kind of strategic thinking that separates great drivers from good ones. This entire episode reveals something fascinating about modern Formula One. Behind all the glamour and precision engineering, these drivers are still human beings dealing with split-second decisions, equipment limitations, and the psychological pressure of racing at over 200 miles per hour. Russell's candid radio messages give us a rare glimpse into the raw emotions and tactical calculations happening inside these cars during a race. While television cameras capture the action on track, team radio reveals the human drama that makes Formula One so compelling. The aftermath saw Mercedes eventually agree to Russell's request for a position swap with Antonelli, though Russell returned the favor later when he couldn't make progress. Both Mercedes drivers finished in the points, with Antonelli in 6th and Russell in 7th. But the team lost ground to Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. When asked about his radio outburst after the race, Russell showed the diplomatic side that's made him such a respected figure in the paddock. He acknowledged that his engineer was simply conveying messages from the team and emphasized that he wasn't fighting Antonelli personally. They were fighting Ferrari and Red Bull for championship points. This incident perfectly encapsulates why Formula One continues to captivate audiences worldwide. Beyond the cutting-edge technology and millionaire drivers, it's still fundamentally about human beings pushing themselves and their machines to the absolute limit. Sometimes that leads to brilliance, sometimes to chaos, and occasionally to moments of pure comedic gold that remind us why we fell in love with this sport in the first place. The Mexican Grand Prix may be remembered for the Verstappen-Hamilton clash, but Russell's hilarious reaction and brutally honest team radio messages have given us one of the most entertaining behind-the-scenes moments of the entire season. Picture this. You're flying down the Monaco street circuit at over 180 miles per hour, millimeters from disaster, fighting for pole position in Formula One. Now imagine doing that completely blind to whether you're going faster or slower than your previous lap. Sounds terrifying, right? Well, Lando Norris has been doing exactly that since May, and it just helped him reclaim the championship lead. What I'm about to reveal will completely change how you think about pressure, focus, and peak performance. This isn't just about racing. This psychological trick could transform how you approach any high-stakes situation in your life. So here's what happened. After his dominant victory at the Mexican Grand Prix, Norris dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. Since winning at Monaco back in May, he's been qualifying without his Delta Time display. For those who don't know, Delta Time is like your GPS for lap times. It tells drivers in real time whether their current lap is faster or slower than their previous best attempt. Every single Formula One driver relies on this data. It's considered essential. Imagine playing a video game where you can't see your score, or taking a test without knowing how much time you have left. That's essentially what Norris has been doing in the most pressure-filled moments of his career. But here's where it gets fascinating. Since removing this safety net, Norris has claimed 4 pole positions, including that absolutely stunning performance in Mexico, where he was over half a second faster than his teammate Oscar Piastri. That's an eternity in Formula One terms. The psychology behind this decision is mind-blowing. When Norris explained his reasoning, he revealed something profound about human performance under pressure. Without the constant feedback of Delta Time, he's forced to attack every single corner with maximum commitment. There's no voice in his head saying, "You're already fast enough," or "You're behind, give up on this," to lap. Instead, he's operating in what psychologists call a state of pure focus. Every corner demands his absolute best because he has no reference point to suggest otherwise. It's like running a race where you can't see the other runners. You have no choice but to give everything you've got from start to finish. This connects to something fascinating about how our brains work. When we have too much information, we often become paralyzed by analysis. Norris admitted he used to stare at the Delta Time too much, letting it dictate his driving rather than trusting his instincts. By removing this distraction, he's tapped into what athletes call the zone, that magical state where conscious thought disappears and peak performance emerges. But there's more to this story. Norris's championship battle this season has been nothing short of dramatic. After retiring from the Dutch Grand Prix in August, he found himself 34 points behind his teammate Piastri. That's a massive deficit with only a handful of races remaining. Most drivers would have crumbled under that pressure. Instead, Norris methodically chipped away at Piastri's lead, claiming podiums at 4 of the next 5 races. His Mexico victory was the culmination of this incredible comeback, putting him 1 point ahead of Piastri with just 4 races remaining. Even more remarkably, he's now 26 points clear of 4-time world champion Max Verstappen. This isn't just about one clever trick, though. Norris has been fine-tuning his approach all season long. McLaren made significant suspension changes that initially left him struggling to feel connected to the car. Rather than complaining, he worked with his engineers to develop solutions, eventually receiving suspension upgrades that unlocked the car's potential. Meanwhile, his teammate Piastri stuck with the original suspension setup, showing how different drivers need different solutions. This highlights another crucial point about peak performance. What works for one person might not work for another. Norris found his unique path to speed. The dedication goes beyond just car setup too. Norris revealed earlier this season that he completely gave up alcohol to maximize his championship chances. Every marginal gain matters when you're fighting for the world title, and he's willing to make sacrifices others might not consider. What makes this Delta Time story so compelling is how it challenges conventional wisdom. In a sport obsessed with data and technology, where teams spend millions analyzing every millisecond, one of the fastest drivers decided that sometimes less information leads to better performance. This has profound implications beyond motorsport. How often do we overwhelm ourselves with metrics, comparisons, and real-time feedback that actually hurts our performance? Whether you're giving a presentation, taking an exam, or pursuing any goal that matters to you, there might be value in occasionally ignoring the scoreboard and trusting your preparation. The timing of this revelation is perfect too. With 4 races remaining and Norris holding a razor-thin championship lead, every qualifying session becomes crucial. Knowing that he's been operating without this safety net makes his recent performances even more impressive and suggests he might have the mental edge needed to capture his first world title. As we head into the final stretch of this championship battle, one thing is clear. Sometimes the most powerful tool at your disposal isn't more information. It's the courage to trust yourself completely. Lando Norris removed his dashboard delta and found something far more valuable: absolute commitment to excellence in every moment. That's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're racing at Monaco or chasing your own dreams. The Formula One silly season just got a whole lot more dramatic. And if you're a Yuki Tsunoda fan, you might want to sit down for this one. What looked like a potential lifeline for the struggling Red Bull driver has just been completely cut off, and the implications are massive for the entire F1 driver market heading into next season. Picture this scenario. You're a talented driver who's been fighting for your Formula One career, desperately hoping for a second chance with a team that has direct connections to your biggest supporter. Everything seems to be aligning perfectly, with technical partnerships and reserve driver openings, creating what looks like the perfect storm for your comeback. Then suddenly, in one swift announcement, that door gets slammed shut forever. That's exactly what just happened to Yuki Tsunoda, and the fallout is going to ripple through the entire paddock. Let me paint the full picture of how we got here. Tsunoda's time at Red Bull Racing has been nothing short of a disaster since he was promoted to partner Max Verstappen after just 2 races into the current season. The Japanese driver, who many thought would thrive alongside the 3-time world champion, has instead struggled massively to match Verstappen's pace and consistency. At 25 years old, what should have been his breakthrough moment has turned into what might be his F1 swan song. Red Bull's patience has clearly worn thin, and all signs point to Tsunoda being replaced by Isaac Hadjar, who has been absolutely flying in his debut season with the Racing Bulls junior team. It's a harsh reality of Formula One that talent alone isn't enough if you can't deliver when it matters most, and unfortunately for Tsunoda, the results simply haven't been there when racing wheel-to-wheel with one of the sport's greatest drivers. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Tsunoda wasn't going down without a fight, and what looked like his saving grace was emerging through an unlikely partnership. Aston Martin had announced they would be entering a technical collaboration with Honda starting in the 2026 season, and Honda just happens to be Tsunoda's long-term backer and strongest supporter in the paddock. The pieces seem to be falling into place beautifully. Felipe Drugovich, Aston Martin's current reserve driver and the 2022 Formula 2 champion, had announced his departure to compete full-time in Formula E with Andretti. This created an opening that seemed tailor-made for someone with Tsunoda's experience and Honda connections. It was the kind of perfect timing that rarely happens in Formula One, where driver movements usually involve complex negotiations and political maneuvering. Industry insiders were already starting to connect the dots. Here was a driver with proven F1 experience, backed by a major manufacturer that was about to become Aston Martin's technical partner, available right when they needed a new reserve driver. From a business perspective, it made complete sense. Honda's influence in securing Tsunoda a role seemed like a logical move to strengthen their relationship with their new partner team. The rumor mill was working overtime, and for good reason. Tsunoda's links with Honda aren't just professional, they're deeply personal and strategic. The Japanese manufacturer has invested heavily in his career from the early days, seeing him as their flag bearer in Formula One. Having their supported driver in a reserve role with their new technical partner would have provided valuable continuity and relationship-building opportunities.
But sometimes in Formula One, what makes sense on paper doesn't translate to reality. And that's exactly what happened here.
Aston Martin just dropped a bombshell announcement that has completely changed the landscape. Instead of going with the experienced Honda-backed Tsunoda, they've chosen 20-year-old American driver Jack Crawford as their third driver for the 2026 season. Crawford will serve as the team's reserve driver for all races next year, effectively closing the door on any possibility of Tsunoda joining the Silverstone-based squad. This decision is fascinating when you look at the bigger picture. Crawford has been working extensively with Aston Martin throughout the current season, serving as what the team describes as a constant presence in their simulator. He's been directly involved in race operations, and perhaps most importantly, has been helping develop the highly anticipated AMR26 car. This is the first Aston Martin Formula One car being designed by legendary aerodynamicist Adrian Newey, making Crawford's development work incredibly valuable. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for Crawford's announcement. He just made his official F1 race weekend debut at the Mexican Grand Prix, stepping in for Lance Stroll during the opening practice session. While his 19th fastest time might not have set the world on fire, the experience gave him crucial track time in an actual F1 car during a competitive weekend. Crawford's credentials are impressive in their own right. Currently sitting second in the Formula 2 championship standings, he's trailing leader Leonardo Fornaroli by just 19 points with only 2 rounds remaining in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. His consistent performance in F1's primary feeder series, combined with his extensive simulator work and growing familiarity with Aston Martin's systems, clearly made him the preferred choice over Tsunoda's experience and Honda connections. For Tsunoda, this represents the closing of what was likely his final realistic pathway back into Formula One. With Red Bull preparing to move on, and Aston Martin now filled, his options are becoming extremely limited. The Honda connection that seemed so promising has proven insufficient to secure him the role, highlighting just how competitive and unforgiving the current driver market has become. The broader implications extend beyond just one driver's career. This decision shows that teams are increasingly prioritizing internal development and long-term planning over short-term political or commercial considerations. Crawford's appointment represents a bet on youth, potential, and established working relationships rather than external pressures or manufacturer preferences. What makes this situation even more intriguing is how it reflects the changing dynamics of modern Formula One. While manufacturer partnerships remain crucial, teams are clearly maintaining their independence when it comes to driver selection. Aston Martin's choice suggests they value internal harmony and development continuity more than external relationship management, even with a significant technical partner like Honda. The countdown to the final races of this season has suddenly become much more dramatic for multiple drivers. While Crawford can now focus on his Formula 2 title fight, knowing his F1 future is secure, Tsunoda faces the harsh reality that his time in the sport's top category might be coming to an end through no fault of his driving ability, but simply due to the brutal mathematics of limited seats and fierce competition. The Formula One world is buzzing with controversy today, and Lewis Hamilton is absolutely furious. The 7-time world champion just unleashed a blistering attack on the FIA after receiving what he calls a completely unfair penalty at the Mexican Grand Prix. But here's the thing that's got everyone talking. Hamilton isn't just upset about the penalty itself. He's calling out the governing body for what he believes are blatant double standards in how they enforce the rules. Let me paint you the picture of what went down in Mexico that has Hamilton seeing red. We're on lap 6 of the race, and the action is absolutely electric. Max Verstappen makes an aggressive dive down the inside at turn 1, setting up what would become one of the most controversial moments of the entire season. Both drivers are going wheel to wheel, neither giving an inch, when Verstappen ends up on the grass and returns to the track ahead of Hamilton. Now, here's where things get spicy. Hamilton, not one to back down from a fight, immediately sets up his counterattack. He takes the outside line heading into turn 4, but disaster strikes. His front right wheel locks up, and suddenly he's the one sliding off onto the grass. But instead of taking the designated escape route back onto the track, Hamilton cuts across and rejoins in 3rd position, right behind Verstappen. The stewards were watching every second of this drama unfold. Their decision? a brutal 10-second time penalty for Hamilton, citing that he left the track and gained a lasting advantage. That penalty would ultimately cost him dearly, dropping him from a potential podium finish all the way down to 8th place. But Hamilton isn't taking this lying down. In the media pen after the race, he absolutely exploded with frustration. His exact words were bone-chilling. "Ultimately, I feel very let down by the governing body. It's double standards, as you can tell. It is what it is." Those aren't the words of someone who's just mildly annoyed. This is a man who feels genuinely betrayed by the sports officials. What makes Hamilton's anger even more intense is the context of what happened earlier in that same battle with Verstappen. Remember, Max had also gone off track just moments before, cutting through grass for what appeared to be a much longer distance than Hamilton's excursion. Yet Verstappen faced no penalty whatsoever for his off-track adventure. The FIA tried to justify their decision with a detailed explanation. They acknowledged that Hamilton couldn't follow the prescribed yellow line route due to excess speed, so technically, he didn't breach the race director's notes. However, they maintained that by cutting the corner and overtaking Verstappen without giving the position back, he gained a lasting advantage that warranted the standard penalty. Ferrari team boss Fred Vasseur jumped to Hamilton's defense with some seriously pointed criticism. Vasseur didn't mince words when he said the penalty cost them a potential 4th place finish. But what really stung was his comparison between the two incidents. He pointed out that Verstappen had cut through grass for about 100 meters earlier in the battle, yet faced no consequences. Vasseur's frustration was palpable as he explained how the timing of the penalty made it virtually impossible to recover. Unlike a 5-second penalty that might be manageable after a pit stop, the 10-second punishment dropped Hamilton into traffic, where overtaking became nearly impossible on Mexico's challenging circuit. The controversy runs even deeper when you consider the broader implications for championship standings. Hamilton currently sits 6th in the Drivers' Championship, a massive 64 points behind his teammate Charles Leclerc. Every point matters at this stage of the season, and losing a potential top 4 finish to what many see as an inconsistent penalty decision adds salt to already deep wounds. What's particularly fascinating about this situation is how it highlights the ongoing tension between drivers and the FIA's officiating standards. Hamilton isn't just some rookie complaining about a bad call. This is a 7-time world champion with decades of experience who genuinely believes the sport's governing body is applying rules inconsistently. The double standards accusation carries serious weight coming from Hamilton. He's suggesting that identical or similar incidents are being judged completely differently depending on which driver is involved. If true, this strikes at the very heart of competitive integrity in Formula One. This controversy also exposes the challenge race stewards face in making split-second decisions about complex racing incidents. The difference between aggressive racing and rule-breaking can be incredibly thin, especially when drivers are fighting wheel-to-wheel at incredible speeds. But Hamilton's broader point about consistency in officiating resonates beyond just this single incident. Fans and drivers alike have long called for more predictable and uniform application of racing regulations. When penalties seem arbitrary or inconsistent, it undermines confidence in the sport's fairness. The timing of this controversy couldn't be more dramatic, coming as the championship fight intensifies heading into the final races of the season. With tensions already running high and every point crucial, disputes over officiating decisions become magnified and more emotionally charged. What happens next could be crucial for Formula One's credibility. Will the FIA address Hamilton's concerns about double standards, or will they stand firm behind their decision? The answer could shape how future incidents are handled and whether drivers maintain trust in the officiating process. This Mexican Grand Prix penalty might seem like just another racing incident, but Hamilton's explosive reaction suggests it represents something much bigger, a fundamental question about fairness and consistency in Formula One's governance that demands serious attention from everyone involved in the sport.